Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a doorway into a world where dinner isn't just a meal, it's a performance, a social examination, and occasionally a minefield of forks. We're diving into the elaborate, exhausting, and sometimes absurd universe of the Victorian dinner party, where knowing which spoon to use could make or break your reputation. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy these deep dives into history's quieter corners. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you've ever attended a dinner party that lasted more than 4 hours. I read them all, mostly while wondering if my own table manners would survive Victorian scrutiny. Now, dim those lights, maybe light a candle if you're feeling atmospheric, and let yourself sink into your most comfortable position. The Victorians would probably insist you sit up straighter, but they're not here, and you've earned your comfort. Let's begin. You stand outside a townhouse in Belgravia, circa 1875. Gas lamps cast pools of warm light on the pavement, and through the tall windows you can see the flicker of hundreds of candles. The fog, that famous London particular, softens every edge, making the evening feel like a watercolor painting someone left out in the rain. Your invitation, delivered 3 weeks ago by a servant in livery, specified 8 o'clock. You checked your pocket watch twice before leaving home because arriving at 7:55 suggests you're desperate for the meal, while appearing at 8:15 implies you think yourself too important for punctuality. Neither transgression will be forgotten. The Victorians keep social ledgers more carefully than their bank accounts. A footman opens the door before you can knock. They've been watching the street, timing each arrival like a railway conductor. He takes your coat and hat with practiced efficiency, his white gloves spotless, despite handling the damp woolens of 20 previous guests. You can smell beeswax polish, hothouse flowers, and something meaty from the kitchen below stairs. Your stomach murmurs hopefully, "It's going to be a long evening." The entrance hall gleams. Every surface that can be polished has been polished. The marble floor reflects the gaslight like still water. A massive mirror in a gilt frame doubles the illumination and lets arriving guests check their appearance one final time. You glance at your reflection, collar points crisp, cravat tied in a mathematical waterfall, not a hair out of place. You'll do. Victorian homes are designed as theaters of status, and the dining room is the main stage. As you follow the butler up the stairs, yes, up, ground floors are for lesser rooms, you pass family portraits whose subjects seem to judge your ascent. The dining room doors open, and the space unfolds like a fanfare. The table dominates everything. It's a mahogany monument stretching nearly 30 feet, set with enough crystal and silver to outfit a small kingdom. White linen cloths cascade to within an inch of the floor. Napkins are folded into elaborate shapes. Some resemble bishops' mitres, others look like swans having nervous breakdowns. The centerpiece is a silver épergne, so tall and elaborate it could double as a small cathedral, dripping with hothouse grapes, pineapples, ruinously expensive, and flowers that smell like they cost more than your monthly rent. Candelabras march down the table's length in military formation, their flames multiplied by strategically placed mirrors. The Victorians understand that dinner is partly about eating and mostly about being seen eating. Light is currency. Shadows are for servants and scandal. The china is Meissen or maybe Sèvres, hand-painted with pastoral scenes of shepherdesses who've never seen actual sheep. Each place setting displays an intimidating array of implements. Dinner plates, fish plates, soup plates, and mysterious small dishes whose purpose you can only guess. The glassware forms a crystal forest. Water goblets, red wine glasses, white wine glasses, champagne flutes, and something tall and narrow for sherry, or possibly regret. The silver is overwhelming. Starting from the outside and working in the Victorian system, you count at least 8 pieces of flatware per setting. fish forks, dinner forks, salad forks, soup spoons, dessert spoons, tiny spoons for salt, knives with different blade shapes for different consistencies of food. A thoughtful hostess has actually labeled each implement with a tiny engraved number, a mercy that would be more helpful if you'd studied the corresponding chart. But the true test isn't the hardware, it's the hierarchy. The table is a map of social standing rendered in place cards and careful distances. The hostess sits at one end, the host at the other. The guest of honor, usually the highest-ranking person in attendance, sits to the hostess's right. Everyone else is arranged by a complex calculus of age, title, intimacy, and whose feelings can be hurt without consequence. You find your place card, beautifully calligraphied, probably by the eldest daughter during her morning hours, and note your position. Middle of the table, right side, between a colonel's widow and a gentleman who breeds orchids. Not prestigious, but not insulting. Your hostess has done her homework. The colonel's widow nods at you with the efficiency of someone who survived 40 years of dinner parties and knows exactly how to manage the evening. The orchid gentleman offers a mild smile that suggests he's already thinking about his greenhouse. You return both gestures with the prescribed degree of warmth, friendly but not familiar, polite but not obsequious. Other guests arrive in carefully timed intervals. A baronet and his wife, announced with titles that drip like honey. A retired admiral who immediately claims the attention of everyone within earshot. Two sisters in matching lavender gowns who look like they've been poured into their corsets. A curate who clutches his napkin like a prayer book. A celebrated soprano whose arrival causes a minor stir. A physician with impressive sideburns. A younger son of a marquess who everyone pretends to remember. Each arrival triggers a ripple of adjustments. Gentlemen rising slightly, ladies nodding, conversations pausing and resuming. The butler announces names, the hostess receives guests with the gracious condescension that is the hallmark of successful entertaining, and the room fills with the particular sound of people being aggressively civilized. The wallpaper is crimson-flocked velvet, heavy with pattern. Portraits of ancestors glower from their frames, their ruffs and robes serving as reminders that this family has been eating elaborately for generations. The ceiling is ornamented with plasterwork, acanthus leaves, cherubs, and possibly something classical involving grapes. A chandelier loaded with crystals catches every flicker of candlelight and scatters it like expensive confetti. The carpet underfoot is Turkish, or pretending to be, its reds and blues carefully chosen to hide the inevitable spills while still broadcasting luxury. The sideboard, a fortress of mahogany, displays the family silver, tureens big enough to bathe a child, serving platters that could double as shields, and a punch bowl that probably has its own insurance policy. The staff lines the walls like sentries. Footmen in livery stand at attention, ready to spring into action at the slightest signal. Their training shows in their posture, ramrod straight, eyes forward, faces carefully blank. They've learned to be simultaneously present and invisible, to anticipate needs before they're spoken, to glide across carpet and parquet without a sound. Behind them, through a servant's door that blends into the wallpaper, you can sense the controlled chaos of the kitchen. Down there, the cook reigns like a general, orchestrating a dozen dishes, managing temperatures and timing with military precision. Scullery maids scrub, kitchen boys run. The between maid carries messages. It's a whole parallel universe dedicated to making this evening appear effortless. The butler, Mr. Harrison, his name is, surveys his domain with the calm confidence of a man who knows every glass, every fork, every social rule that might be broken tonight. He's been with the family for 23 years. He remembers every dinner party, every awkward moment, every triumph. His memory is institutional. His authority is absolute. Even the master of the house defers to him in matters of table service. Conversation bubbles up in careful volleys. Weather, naturally. It's always safe, always available, always mildly disappointing. The opera season, upcoming balls, a scandal in Parliament, discussed with more energy than the weather, but still within bounds. Someone mentions travel plans. Someone else mentions their daughter's watercolors. The curate mentions something theological that everyone politely pretends to understand. You notice the room's temperature, almost uncomfortably warm from the fire blazing in the marble fireplace and the body heat of 22 people in heavy clothing. Ladies fan themselves discreetly. Gentlemen wish they could loosen their collars, but don't dare. The candles add their own heat, tiny furnaces multiplied by the dozens. The clock on the mantel, French, gilded, precise, shows 8:27. Nearly everyone has arrived. The hostess catches the butler's eye. He nods infinitesimally. The machinery is ready to begin. But first, the final ritual of arrival. A gong sounds, melodious, insistent, and the company begins the procession into the dining room. The host offers his arm to the highest-ranking lady. The guest of honor escorts the hostess. Everyone else pairs off according to the strict precedence that governs these matters, a dance older than waltzes. You offer your arm to the colonel's widow, who accepts with a practiced smile. Her hand rests lightly on your sleeve. Too much pressure would suggest dependency. Too little would imply disdain. You process into the dining room, finding your chairs, waiting for everyone to be seated before sitting yourself. The hostess remains standing for a moment, surveying her table like a general reviewing troops. Everything is perfect, or as perfect as human effort and considerable expense can make it. She sits. Everyone sits. Napkins are unfolded with synchronized precision, each person placing the linen across their lap at the same moment. The butler gestures to the footman. The kitchen doors open silently. The first course appears as if by magic, carried on silver salvers by servants who've practiced this procession until they could do it blindfolded. The Victorian dinner party has begun. In this room, for the next 4 hours, you will navigate a social minefield disguised as a meal. Every gesture will be noted, every word will be weighed, every fork selection will be judged. This isn't just dinner, it's a performance, an examination, and a ritual that holds together an entire social order. But for now, the soup course arrives, steaming gently in porcelain bowls. You reach for the correct spoon, larger than a teaspoon, rounder than a dessert spoon, positioned on the outside right of your place setting. You wait for the hostess to lift her spoon first. The evening unfolds. What you don't see, as you sample that first perfectly seasoned spoonful of consommé, is the 3 days of military-level preparation that made this evening possible. Victorian dinner parties don't happen. They're engineered. The planning began weeks ago when your hostess decided that her social obligations required an entertainment. Perhaps she's returning hospitality, launching a daughter, impressing a potential business connection for her husband, or simply maintaining her position in the intricate web of social exchanges that governs her class. Whatever the motivation, dinner parties are the currency of her world.
She consulted her social diary, a leather-bound ledger more sacred than a Bible, and selected a date that avoided conflicts with other known entertainments, major holidays, and the increasingly unpredictable calendar of her eldest daughter's headaches. Then came the guest list, a puzzle requiring the strategic skills of a chess master. 22 guests, an even number for the procession into dinner, a mix of old friends and new acquaintances. Enough variety to ensure conversation without risking combustible combinations. No seating two intellectuals together where they might monopolize discussion. No placing the bore next to someone too polite to escape. No pairing former lovers or current enemies. She consulted her husband on gentlemen of business importance. She consulted her daughter on the younger set. She consulted her own judgment on who would shine, who would bore, who would drink too much, and who would tell the amusing story about the archbishop that everyone pretends to hear for the first time. The invitations went out 3 weeks prior, engraved cards in copperplate script, delivered by hand by a servant in livery. Mr. and Mrs. Reginald Ashworth request the pleasure of your company at dinner on Thursday, the 23rd of April at 8 o'clock. Below, in the corner, RSVP and a date. Responses arrived with gratifying promptness, refusals, always with elaborate regrets, and acceptances, always with evident pleasure. The hostess adjusted her table plan accordingly, recruiting a spare gentleman when the numbers threatened to become uneven, dropping a couple when someone's cousin appeared unexpectedly from India. 3 days before the event, the kitchen campaign begins. The cook, Mrs. Patterson, a formidable woman with arms like a blacksmith and a temper to match, receives her orders. The menu has been planned for weeks, revised twice, and finally approved by the mistress after considerable discussion. It's a delicate balance, impressive but not showy, seasonal but with some luxuries, familiar enough to be comforting but novel enough to be interesting. The menu must showcase the cook's skills without exhausting her staff. It must provide variety without confusion. It must last approximately 4 hours without anyone feeling rushed or bored. 12 courses, each requiring careful preparation, precise timing, and flawless presentation. The turtle soup alone required 2 days of work. The turtle purchased live, killed in the cellar, its flesh simmered for hours with vegetables and wine until it yielded the clear, intensely flavored liquid that now fills your bowl. The fish came from Billingsgate this morning, packed in ice and delivered to the kitchen door at dawn. The cook inspected each turbot like a jeweler examining diamonds, rejecting any specimen with clouded eyes or dull scales. The whitebait, tiny, silvery fish eaten whole, required gentle handling. They're fried at the last possible moment to achieve the perfect, crispy delicacy. The lamb cutlets were butchered yesterday, trimmed to perfection, their exposed bones wrapped in paper frills that look like tiny chef's hats. The ducklings have been hanging in the cold pantry for 3 days to develop flavor. The turkey, already a luxury, has been stuffed with truffles, those mysterious black fungi that cost more per pound than silver.
The game, pheasants and woodcock, arrived from the estate in Scotland, traveled south, packed in ice in special railway carriages designed for such delicacies. They've been hung until they reached the perfect point of ripeness that separates delicacy from decay, then plucked, drawn, and prepared for roasting. The vegetables came from the kitchen garden and the forcing houses where gardeners coaxed early asparagus and hothouse flowers into blooming weeks before their natural season. The peas are so small and sweet, they hardly need cooking. The asparagus spears are thick as a man's thumb and green as jealousy. The desserts represent days of work by the kitchen's specialists. The Charlotte Russe, a construction of sponge fingers and Bavarian cream, required the pastry cook's entire morning. The soufflé will be mixed at the last moment and rushed to the table while still rising, a theatrical climax to the sweet course. The crème brûlée, with its crackable sugar crust, cooled overnight in the iced house. But the menu is only the beginning. 3 days before the party, the house begins its transformation. The dining room is stripped and reconstructed like a stage set. The housemaids, directed by the housekeeper, Mrs. Bramwell, descend with brushes, cloths, and enough beeswax polish to lubricate a small factory. The chandelier is lowered on its pulley system, a terrifying operation that requires 3 people and steady nerves, and each crystal pendant is washed in vinegar water until it sparkles with renewed brilliance. The silver comes out of locked cabinets where it's stored wrapped in felt. Every piece, and there are hundreds, is polished with a special paste that makes the maids' hands ache and turns their fingernails gray. Forks, knives, spoons, serving pieces, candlesticks, salt cellars, the elaborate apparent centerpiece that requires 2 footmen to lift. Everything must gleam. The china is unpacked from its protective cases and washed, examined for chips or cracks, then arranged in careful stacks in the butler's pantry. The glassware, some inherited, some purchased for this season only, is polished until it rings when tapped, each glass catching light like a captured star. The table linen represents an investment that could buy a cottage.
Damask tablecloths woven in Ireland, each large enough to serve as a ship's sail, are pressed with irons heated on the kitchen range until every crease is knife-edge sharp. The napkins, each embroidered with the family monogram, receive similar attention. Wrinkles are the enemy. Perfection is the goal. The flowers arrive the morning of the party, delivered by the family's preferred florist in enormous boxes smelling of greenhouses and wealth. The hostess's personal maid and the housekeeper spend 2 hours arranging them. Roses, lilies, orchids, ferns, and exotic specimens whose names no one can pronounce. The centerpiece must be tall enough to be impressive, but low enough that guests can see each other across the table. A delicate balance. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, controlled chaos reigns. The cook has drawn up a minutely detailed timetable. The turtle soup must be reheated at exactly 8:15 to be perfect at 8:30. The turbot requires 25 minutes in the poaching liquid. The whitebait must be fried in 3 batches, exactly 90 seconds each, just before service. The roasts must be carved at specific intervals. The soufflé requires 17 minutes at a precise oven temperature with no opening of the door. 2 days before the party, the butler takes inventory of the wine cellar. Tonight's dinner requires different wines for different courses. Sherry with the soup, white burgundy with the fish, claret with the lamb and turkey, champagne with the dessert, and port with the cheese that will follow in the gentleman's smoking room. Each bottle is selected with care, brought up from the cellar, allowed to reach proper temperature, decanted if necessary. The butler knows every vintage in the collection, every bottle's history, when it was laid down, when it should be drunk. He consults his ledgers, makes notes, arranges the bottles in order on the sideboard where they'll be ready for service. The day of the party, the house enters a state of heightened alert that would impress military commanders. The family is essentially exiled from the dining room and its adjacent spaces. The children are sent to eat in the nursery. The master of the house retreats to his study. The hostess, despite being the evening's architect, is politely asked not to interfere. The footmen arrive early to set the table, a process taking 2 hours and requiring the precision of surgeons. Each plate must be exactly 1 inch from the table's edge. Each piece of cutlery must be precisely spaced and aligned. The glasses must form a diagonal line from the upper right of each place setting. The napkins must be folded identically. The place cards must be perfectly centered on each plate. A carpenter's level is employed to ensure everything is straight. A measuring tape confirms consistent spacing. The butler walks the table's perimeter 3 times, making microscopic adjustments, his eye catching discrepancies invisible to lesser mortals. The candles, hundreds of them, are new, their wicks trimmed to ensure even burning. They'll be lit precisely 30 minutes before the guests arrive, giving the room time to fill with warm, flattering light without overheating. In the bedrooms, ladies' maids prepare their mistresses like warriors being armed for battle. The process begins hours before the party, with hair washing, if necessary, curling, pinning, and arranging into the elaborate styles that signal fashion and status. A wealthy woman might spend 3 hours at her dressing table, her maid's fingers working with practiced precision. The corset comes first, laced tight enough to create the fashionable silhouette, but not so tight to cause fainting, though a slight breathlessness is acceptable and even desirable. Then the layers: chemise, drawers, petticoats, several, bustle or crinoline, depending on the year, the dress itself. The dresses are magnificent constructions of silk, satin, taffeta, or velvet. Dinner dresses differ from ball gowns, slightly less formal, but still elaborate. Bodices are cut lower than daywear, but higher than ballwear, revealing the shoulders and décolletage while maintaining propriety. Sleeves are short, skirts are elaborate with pleating, ruffles, and train.
Jewelry is selected with strategic care. Too little suggests poverty or puritanism. Too much suggests nouveau riche desperation. The right pieces, inherited cameos, modest diamonds, perhaps a pearl choker, telegraph old money and good taste.
Gloves are mandatory, even at dinner. Long gloves in silk or kid leather, carefully fitted, expensive. A lady may remove them for eating, though some keep them on for the entire meal, but they must be present and perfect. Gentlemen's preparation is theoretically simpler, but still exacting. Evening dress means white tie, a more formal arrangement than the later black tie that would become standard. A black tailcoat, black trousers with a single stripe of silk braid, white waistcoat, wing collar shirt with starched front, white bow tie tied by hand, pre-tied as déclassé, patent leather shoes. The collar points must be sharp enough to constitute a weapon. The shirt studs must be gold or pearl, inherited or at least appearing to be. The handkerchief in the pocket must be white linen, folded precisely. The gloves, white kid, are carried, not worn. A gentleman's valet helps with the tie, ensures the collar sits correctly, brushes the coat one final time. The process may take an hour or more, each detail checked and rechecked. A man who appears at dinner with a crooked tie or scuffed shoes might as well wear a sign saying, "My valet is incompetent," or worse, "I have no valet." By 7:30, the house is ready. The table gleams, the candles flicker, the flowers exhale their expensive fragrance. In the kitchen, pans bubble and roast. Upstairs, ladies add final pins to their hair. The butler adjusts his white gloves one more time. At 7:55, the first carriage arrives. The footman stationed at the door straightens. The evening begins. Every dinner party is a performance, but it's also a test, a social examination with stakes higher than mere etiquette. Reputations can be built or destroyed between the soup and the savory. Business deals can be sealed or sabotaged over the roast. Marriage prospects can bloom or wither before the cheese course arrives. And everyone, from the highest-ranking duke to the youngest daughter, knows they're being watched, judged, and scored. The successful dinner party guest is part actor, part diplomat, part entertainer, and part tightrope walker, balancing between too much personality and too little, between wit and inappropriateness, between engagement and exhaustion. The hostess, meanwhile, orchestrates from her position at table's end, a conductor keeping multiple conversations flowing, ensuring no one is ignored, drawing out the shy, gently controlling the verbose, signaling the butler for the next course, catching the eye of the soprano when musical entertainment will be needed later. She makes it look effortless, which is the highest compliment a Victorian hostess can receive. Behind that serene smile lies military-level planning, diplomatic quality strategy, and theatrical directing skills. She is CEO, general, and magician combined. As you finish your soup, reaching for the correct spoon to capture the last delicate drops, you realize that everything, absolutely everything, has been planned, prepared, rehearsed, and timed. The spontaneous conversation is guided. The casual elegance required hours of labor. The effortless grace cost someone great effort. Welcome to the Victorian dinner party, where nothing is what it seems, everything matters, and 4 hours somehow feels both endless and fleeting. The soup bowls disappear with the silent efficiency that characterizes the evening. Footmen glide around the table, lifting porcelain without a clink, removing your spoon without a sound. The fish course appears, seconds later, the turbot arranged on platters like pale marble sculptures, the whitebait glittering like edible treasure. This is when the real work begins. Not just eating, anyone can eat, but navigating the social choreography that transforms a meal into an event worth remembering or, if done poorly, worth gossiping about for months. The fish fork sits directly to the left of your plate, slightly broader than the dinner fork, with tines that are wider and shorter. The fish knife, positioned to the right, has a broad blade with a slight notch designed to separate delicate flesh from bone. You've been taught never to cut fish with a dinner knife. The metaphysical offense is unclear, but apparently grave.
You serve yourself from the platter offered by the footman, taking a modest portion. Too much suggests greed, too little suggests you're judging the cook's efforts. The hollandaise sauce comes in a silver boat, golden and trembling. You spoon a conservative amount, aware that 6 more courses awake, and appearing too hungry is decidedly unfashionable. The colonel's widow to your left begins conversation with the question that opens 1,000 dinner parties. Are you much in town this season? It's code. The real question is, are you wealthy enough to maintain a London residence? Are you socially active enough to have a season? Are you worth cultivating? Your answer requires calibration. We keep rooms in Belgravia, though my family's estate remains in Gloucestershire. Strikes the right balance: property ownership, rural respectability, urban sophistication. The widow nods approvingly and shares her own seasonal arrangements, which involve a daughter out this year and the exhausting schedule of balls, at-homes, and musicals required to secure her a suitable match. To your right, the orchid gentleman has been discussing tropical cultivation with the soprano, who appears to find his descriptions of humidity requirements surprisingly engaging. You lean slightly toward their conversation, engaged but not intruding, and offer a perfectly timed observation about seeing remarkable orchids at Kew Gardens. The gentleman's face brightens. You've offered him an opportunity to educate, which is to conversation what butter is to bread.
Down the table, multiple conversations weave and overlap. The Admiral dominates his section with stories from the Crimean War, delivered with the assumption that everyone present has been waiting decades to hear them. The 2 Lavender sisters discuss the upcoming season's fashions with authority born of numerous dressmaker consultations. The curate offers gentle opinions on theological matters, carefully avoiding anything controversial enough to require actual thought. The host, from his position to the far end of the table, tosses observations to various conversational clusters like a gardener spreading seed. His role is to ensure no group becomes too insulated, the topics circulate, that everyone has opportunities to contribute. He notes who is speaking too much, a gentle redirect required, and who is speaking too little. A direct question will draw them out. The wines flow in prescribed order, each bottle decanted with ceremony, each glass filled to 2/3, enough to enjoy but not so much as to threaten judgment. The white burgundy with the fish is cold, crisp, and expensive. You sip, note the quality, compliment the host with a subtle nod. He acknowledges with equal subtlety. Small courtesies grease the evening's wheels. The fish plates are cleared. A brief pause, perhaps 30 seconds, during which palate and conversation regroup. Then the entrees arrive. The lamb cutlets with their paper frills, the vol au vent pastries bursting with rich filling, the ducklings glazed to mahogany perfection. This is the first course where genuine choice enters the equation. Multiple dishes appear simultaneously, and you must select. The footmen circle with platters, offering each in turn. You take lamb and duck, passing on the vol au vent, too rich this early, you'll regret it by the roast course. Others make different calculations. The retired admiral takes all 3, his appetite apparently undimmed by 60 years of naval provisions. The lamb is perfect, pink at the center, crusted with herbs, tender enough to yield to your fork without requiring the knife to work hard. The peas are so small and sweet, they could be dessert. You eat with careful pace, not gulping, not dawdling, maintaining the rhythm that allows conversation to flow without cold food. And the conversation does flow, following rules as precise as those governing your fork selection. Topics must be interesting but not controversial, entertaining but not vulgar, personal but not too intimate. Weather remains perpetually acceptable. The fog tonight was remarkable, like pea soup with ambitions. Gentle laughter ripples. No one mentions that the fog is also deadly, carrying coal smoke and disease into every lung in the city. That would be unpleasant, and unpleasantness must be avoided. The opera provides safe harbor. Did you attend the recent production of La Traviata?
The soprano was adequate, though I recall Madame Grisi's interpretation in 56 with greater fondness. This allows everyone to demonstrate cultivation while deploying carefully calibrated criticism. Literature offers opportunities for display. Have you read Mrs. Gaskell's latest? I find her observations on industrial life quite piercing. A gentleman counters with Dickens. Someone else champions George Eliot. The curate unexpectedly reveals a taste for sensation novels, quickly tempered with assurances that he reads them purely to understand the degraded tastes of his parishioners. Travel stories are always welcome, provided they end successfully. We toured the lakes last summer, quite restorative. The Alps offer magnificent prospects, though the hotels are variable. No one mentions illness, lost luggage, or arguing with one's spouse in a Turin railway station. Travel in the telling must be entirely pleasant. Politics requires careful navigation. General principles are acceptable. The empire requires steady governance. Specific policies are dangerous. Mentioning actual legislative disputes risks exposing disagreement, and disagreement at dinner is catastrophic. One must appear engaged with the world while maintaining complete agreeability. Science provides fashionable territory, provided it remains comfortably abstract. Darwin is mentioned but not discussed. His theories either accepted with sophisticated nonchalance or dismissed with religious certainty, depending on the audience. Someone shares a wonder about the telephone demonstration at the exhibition. The medical man offers carefully edited observations on the latest advances in surgery. Nothing too graphic, certainly nothing involving blood. The servants continue their silent dance, removing plates, presenting new courses, refilling glasses, adjusting the temperature of the room by banking the fire slightly. Their presence is so unobtrusive that you almost forget they're there, which is precisely the point. Victorian servants are trained to be human furniture, essential but unremarked upon. The relevés arrive, the saddle of mutton, magnificently roasted, and the turkey studded with truffles like dark jewels. The carving is performed by the butler and first footman at the sideboard, each slice falling in perfect, pink uniformity. The truffle's earthy perfume adds an almost indecent luxury to the turkey. You accept both, your plate now requiring careful architectural management to accommodate the growing abundance. The conversation around you has reached its middle movement, familiar enough for comfort, engaged enough for interest. The colonel's widow is telling you about her late husband's service in India, stories polished by 40 years of retelling. You listen with practiced attention, offering small confirmations that show you're engaged. Remarkable. How extraordinary. One can hardly imagine. The orchid gentleman, having exhausted botanical topics, has pivoted to discussing his recent acquisition of a microscope and the fascinating discoveries visible in a drop of pond water. The soprano listens with the professional attention of someone accustomed to being interesting herself, but secure enough to let others shine.
Down the table, the Admiral has commandeered 3 listeners and is deep into a story about gunnery practice off Malta that involves mathematical calculations and appears to have no end. The host catches your eye and offers a microscopically small smile, shared acknowledgement that the Admiral is being the Admiral, a force of nature like weather, to be endured with grace. The younger people at the table's far end are slightly more animated, their laughter occasionally rising above the general murmur. The hostess glances their way, not disapproving, but monitoring. Youth is allowed enthusiasm, but must not dominate. The volume subsides slightly, the young people reading the room's temperature and adjusting accordingly. The claret appears, a Bordeaux from a good year, decanted hours ago to breathe, now pouring like liquid garnets into your glass. The footman fills it with the precision of a chemist, tilting bottle and glass at complementary angles to avoid splashing or excessive air incorporation. The wine is magnificent, full-bodied enough to stand up to the rich meat courses, complex enough to reward attention. Between courses, there are brief respites, 30 seconds, perhaps a minute, when plates have gone and new ones haven't yet arrived. These moments are crucial. You don't slump or relax. That would suggest exhaustion or, worse, boredom. Instead, you adjust your posture, dab your lips with your napkin, fold it afterward with the soiled portion concealed, take a sip of wine, and recalibrate for the next conversational sally. The roast course arrives with theatrical flourish, pheasants with their tail feathers still attached, arranged as if they might take flight from the platter, and woodcock, smaller and darker, presented whole. The game is carved with reverence, the footman handling each bird as if it were made of spun gold rather than feathers and flesh. This is the course where the meal reaches its apex. Everything before was preparation, everything after will be denouement. The game is perfectly hung, aged to the point where flavor intensifies without crossing into decay. The pheasant is tender, its meat dark and rich. The woodcock, traditionally eaten whole, including certain internal organs that polite people don't name, represents the absolute pinnacle of game eating. You accept pheasant, passing on the woodcock. It's a delicacy that requires either extensive training or an adventurous constitution, and you possess neither. The accompaniments are simple: bread sauce, game chips, potatoes sliced transparently thin and fried to lacy crispness, watercress that adds a peppery note to cut the richness. The conversation has shifted into its final act. People are more relaxed now, the initial social anxieties smoothed by wine and successful navigation of earlier courses. Stories become slightly longer, laughter comes more easily. The rigid formality of the evening's opening has mellowed into something almost resembling actual fellowship. The colonel's widow is telling you about her daughter's recent engagement. To a younger son, yes, but from an excellent family, and the young man has prospects in the diplomatic service. You congratulate appropriately, noting that India offers opportunities for advancement. She beams, pleased to have shared this intelligence with someone who appreciates its significance. The orchid gentleman has moved from microscopes to photography, his latest obsession. He describes the magical process of developing plates, watching images emerge from blank glass like ghosts gaining substance. The soprano mentions knowing several artistic photographers who create remarkable tableaux vivants. You contribute an observation about seeing Matthew Brady's American Civil War photographs at an exhibition, somber but technically impressive. Down the table, someone asks the hostess about her charity work. She responds with practiced modesty. Yes, she serves on the committee for the Foundling Hospital, and yes, the annual ball is quite successful, and naturally, the needs are always greater than the resources. The curate nods approvingly. Charitable work is not only acceptable for ladies, it's expected, a way of demonstrating both compassion and social standing. A footman approaches the admiral with a wine decanter. The admiral, mid-story, waves him away without pausing his narrative. The footman glides to the next person with unruffled dignity. This is his art: anticipating needs, accepting rejection without offense, maintaining invisible efficiency. The game plates are cleared. There's a slightly longer pause now, perhaps 2 minutes, while the table is entirely cleared, crumbs swept with a special silver implement. The stage reset for the transformation from savory to sweet. The entremets arrive, sweet and savory dishes presented simultaneously in the French style. Asparagus spears thick as thumbs in mousseline sauce, a towering champagne jelly that quivers with architectural ambition, charlotte russe with its crown of sponge fingers, a strawberry soufflé that has risen to impossible heights and must be served immediately before it collapses, crème brûlée with its satisfying caramel crust. This is where choice becomes both pleasure and anxiety. The savory options, asparagus, and sweet options, everything else, appear together, and you must navigate between them. Convention suggests taking a small amount of one savory and one sweet, appreciating both without appearing gluttonous. You select asparagus and charlotte russe. The asparagus is perfect, barely cooked, retaining enough crispness to offer resistance, the mousseline sauce rich enough to coat but light enough not to overwhelm. The Charlotte Russe is a revelation. Layers of sponge and Bavarian cream, sweet but not cloying, with a hint of vanilla and possibly rum.
The conversation has grown almost languid now, softened by wine, food, and the comfortable knowledge that the evening has been successful. No disasters have occurred. No one has committed a fatal faux pas. The social examination has been passed. Someone requests the strawberry soufflé story, apparently a legendary disaster from a previous dinner party involving a kitchen door slammed at a crucial moment and a soufflé that deflated with what witnesses described as an audible sigh. The hostess tells it with self-deprecating charm, turning catastrophe into entertainment. Everyone laughs, released by the assurance that even the most careful hostess occasionally faces disaster. The champagne appears, a different wine now, sweeter and lighter, appropriate for the dessert courses. It fizzes gently in the special flutes, each bubble catching candlelight. A toast is proposed by the host, to good company and good conversation. Glasses are raised, crystal ringing softly. You drink, the champagne cool and celebratory on your tongue. The final dessert course arrives. Fresh fruits, grapes, peaches, pears arranged in pyramids, nuts in silver bowls, and ices in small crystal cups. The ices are modern marvels, requiring ice houses and careful preparation, arriving at the table still frozen despite the room's warmth. You select a peach and a small serving of lemon ice. The peach is so ripe it nearly dissolves at first bite, its juice requiring immediate attention with your napkin. The ice is tart and refreshing after the richness of the preceding courses, a palate cleanser that somehow manages to be both substantial and ethereal. The pace has slowed considerably now. 4 hours have passed, though it feels both longer and shorter than that. The candles have burned down several inches. The conversation has cycled through every acceptable topic and returned to weather, that safest of harbors. The hostess catches the eye of the senior lady present, in this case, the admiral's wife, a formidable woman who said little but observed everything. A nearly imperceptible nod is exchanged. The signal has been given. The hostess rises. Every lady at the table rises with her in a synchronized movement that would impress a ballet corps. The gentlemen rise as well, standing at their places as the ladies prepare to withdraw. "Shall we leave the gentlemen to their port?" the hostess asks, though it's not really a question. It's an announcement, a command wrapped in the softest possible phrasing. The ladies process out in order of precedence, the admiral's wife first, then the others by rank, age, and obscure calculations of social position. The soprano goes early, her professional status conferring unusual rank. The Lavender sisters flutter past, the young ladies bring up the rear, still whispering to each other behind their fans. The dining room door closes behind them with a soft click. The room feels suddenly larger and emptier, though also more relaxed. The performance's first act has concluded. Now the gentleman's portion of the evening begins. A different rhythm, different rules, different dangers. The butler produces the port, a vintage Portugal, dark as sin and twice as necessary. The decanter begins its clockwise journey around the table, each man pouring for his neighbor in a ritual of masculine courtesy. The port never travels counterclockwise. Why this rule exists, no one quite remembers, but breaking it would mark you as hopelessly ignorant. You settle into a chair closer to the host, the table compressing now that half the company has withdrawn. Cigars appear from a sandalwood box, each one the size of a small telescope. The smoke rises in gentle clouds, softening the candlelight further, adding a masculine incense to the room. The conversation shifts, not dramatically. Gentlemen are still gentlemen, civilization still holds, but the guard drops slightly. Business may be discussed now. Politics engaged more directly. Stories told that would have made the ladies reach for their smelling salts. The Admiral launches into a tale about a brothel in Gibraltar that somehow involves a parrot, a Commodore's hat, and a case of mistaken identity. The men laugh, real laughter now, not the careful social chuckle of the mixed company. The curate blushes, but laughs too, proving himself human beneath the collar. This is when you learn what can go wrong at a Victorian dinner party. Because despite all the planning, all the protocols, all the careful social choreography, disasters happen. And when they happen, they become legendary. The host, mellowed by port, shares the story of his first major dinner party 20 years ago, when he was newly married and desperate to impress. Everything had been perfect, until the soup course, when a footman tripped over the carpet fringe and sent an entire tureen of turtle soup cascading across the tablecloth and into the lap of a bishop. The room erupted in chaos. The bishop, scolded and sputtering, stood with soup dripping from his vestments like a gruesome baptism. The footman, horrified, tried to help and succeeded only in knocking over a candelabra. Ladies shrieked. Gentlemen leapt to assist. The hostess, your current hostess, 20 years younger and far less experienced, burst into tears. But the bishop, bless him, had risen to the occasion with magnificent grace. He declared that if a little hot soup was the worst trial the Lord sent him, he would count himself fortunate. He borrowed a dressing gown, returned to finish the meal, and later wrote a thank-you note that became a treasured family document. The footman was retained, the story became legend, and the host learned that disaster, handled well, can actually enhance a reputation. The younger son of the Marquis contributes his own horror story, a hunting party weekend, where the hostess, determined to showcase local game, served venison that had been hung too long, not slightly too long, dramatically, catastrophically too long. The meat was, in his delicate phrasing, past its prime and heading enthusiastically towards its afterlife.
The first guest to taste it made a valiant effort to swallow, failed, and reached for their wine glass with desperate urgency. Others followed. Within minutes, half the table was coughing, the other half was trying not to laugh, and the hostess was pale with mortification. The course was abandoned. An emergency consultation with the kitchen produced cold fowl and apologies. The weekend continued, but the story outlived everyone's dignity. These tales cascade around the table, each man contributing his own disaster or near miss. There was the musicale, where the celebrated pianist arrived drunk and played the same piece 3 times, each performance more creative than the last. The garden party, where a sudden storm transformed elaborate hats into papier-mâché sculptures. The ball, where a chandelier's chain broke, sending crystal raining down like expensive hail. Miraculously, no one was hurt, though several gowns were casualties. The orchid gentleman shares a quieter catastrophe. A dinner party where he made the fatal error of monopolizing the conversation, delivering a 40-minute lecture on plant taxonomy that left his fellow guests glazed with boredom. He realized his error only when he paused for breath and heard the silence, not the silence of rapt attention, but the silence of people who have stopped listening and are mentally composing their excuses for leaving early. I learned, he says ruefully, that enthusiasm must be rationed like wine. A little enlivens, too much stupefies. The medical man recalls a dinner where discussion accidentally turned to surgical techniques. I was young and foolish, resulting in 3 ladies fainting in quick succession, and the hostess instituting a permanent ban on medical topics at her table. But the true disasters, everyone agrees, involve violations of precedence. The physician tells of attending a dinner where a gentleman, new to society and ignorant of the rules, took the arm of a lady senior to himself and escorted her into dinner before the proper pairing could occur. The resulting confusion had people entering in chaotic clusters, the table's careful hierarchy destroyed, the evening's social architecture collapsing like house of cards. The hostess, a dragon of etiquette, had frozen at the head of the table, her face suggesting she was mentally calculating whether to proceed or call the whole thing off. She chose to proceed with icy dignity, but the unfortunate gentleman never received another invitation. His social death was swift and absolute. Precedence, the host said solemnly, is the skeleton upon which the dinner party hangs its flesh. Break it, and you have only a pile of bones and disappointed guests. The younger men look alarmed. The older men nod sagely. The port continues its clockwise progression. There are other cautionary tales. The gentleman who confused his neighbor's daughter with her mother and made remarks appropriate to the senior lady's age, the daughter was not amused. The lady who arrived wearing the same dress as the hostess, a mortification so profound that both women spent the evening attempting invisibility. The guest who got dramatically drunk declared undying love for another guest's wife and had to be escorted home in a wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow? Someone asked incredulously. His legs had entirely ceased cooperation with his ambitions, the teller explained. The groom improvised. Wine-related disasters provide their own subgenre. Red wine spilled on white silk, white wine spilled on red carpet, an entire decanter knocked over by a gesturing arm during an enthusiastic story about hunting, a bottle that had turned to vinegar but was served anyway by a butler who panicked. The guests were too polite to mention it, resulting in an entire course consumed in silent suffering. Food catastrophes offer equally rich material. The fish that wasn't quite fresh, guests discreetly setting down forks, hostess quietly dying inside. The soufflé that deflated. Several versions of this story exists. The ice cream that arrived liquid after the ice house failed. The spectacular collapse of an aspic tower that had been too ambitious in its architecture. And then there are the social torpedoes, the accidental revelations, misunderstood comments, and innocent remarks that land like grenades in polite conversation. A guest asking about someone's wife, unaware the couple was recently and scandalously separated. Another guest praising a new play, not knowing the hostess's daughter had been passed over for the leading role. A gentleman making jokes about a profession, not realizing another guest practiced that exact profession. A lady mentioning someone's financial troubles, not knowing said someone was seated 3 chairs away with excellent hearing. The curate contributed his own painful memory, expressing strong opinions on a theological dispute, only to discover the bishop who took the opposite position was the uncle of his dinner companion and had been expected to arrive late. The bishop did arrive late, just in time to hear the curate's peroration. The curate's next posting was to a very small parish in a very remote location. I learned, he says quietly, that opinions are like loaded pistols, best kept holstered until you're certain of your targets and your aim. The conversation drifts to salvaging disasters, the art of graceful recovery. The consensus is that acknowledgement works better than pretense. If you knock over a wine glass, apologize briefly and move on. Don't grovel or elaborate. If you commit a verbal gaffe, a quick "I beg your pardon" is superior to either pretending it didn't happen or launching into lengthy justification. The host shares his philosophy. A dinner party is theater where everyone performs civility. The occasional missed cue or forgotten line doesn't ruin the play, it makes us human. The real disaster is when someone refuses to stay in character, when incivility breaks through. He recalls a dinner where a guest, offended by some perceived slight, stood up mid-course and delivered a speech about the host's failings before storming out. The remaining guests sat in horrified silence. The hostess recovered admirably, suggesting they move directly to the next course and discussing the weather with such determination that everyone rallied around her. But the incident cast a pall. Wounded feelings lingered. The offending guest found himself uninvited from every subsequent gathering. Social death again, swift and complete.
The unforgivable sin, the medical man observes, is not the occasional dropped fork or mistimed comment. It's the refusal to pretend these things matter while understanding they don't truly matter. We maintain the fiction of perfect propriety while extending grace for human imperfection. That's the contract. Someone mentions the elaborate thank you notes required after dinner parties. Not optional, not casual, but mandatory written performances of gratitude delivered within 3 days. These notes have their own art and their own disasters. Notes too brief suggest ingratitude. Notes too effusive suggest insincerity. Notes that arrive late suggest disorganization or worse, indifference. The younger son admits to once sending a thank you note to the wrong hostess, copying out from his previous correspondence and forgetting to change the name. The error was discovered when he received a frusty response, noting that while she was pleased he enjoyed her magnificent arrangement of hothouse roses, she had, in fact, decorated with lilies, and perhaps he was confusing her dinner with someone else's. His recovery required a second note of such abject apology that it bordered on parody, plus a massive delivery of actual hothouse roses. The hostess, amused by his mortification, forgave him, but the story followed him for years. The clock chimes, 10:30 already. The port has made its third circuit. The cigars are mostly ash. The conversation has cycled through disasters, near misses, and the occasionally miraculous recovery. The host glances at the door. Upstairs, the ladies await in the drawing room. Tea has been served. The piano has likely been played. The gentleman's interlude must conclude. "Shall we join the ladies?" he suggests. The men rise, stubbing out cigars, straightening waistcoats, preparing to re-enter the civilized realm where ladies await. The butler opens the door. The smell of port and tobacco follows them out, marking them as men who've enjoyed their masculine respite. You file out with the others, climbing stairs toward the drawing room where laughter and piano music drift through half-open doors. Behind you, the dining room sits in candle-lit stillness, the table a battlefield of crumbs and crystal, the servants already beginning their own marathon of clearing, washing, and restoring order from the evening's elegant chaos. The drawing room glows with a softer light than the dining room's blaze, oil lamps and a few carefully placed candles creating a warm twilight perfect for digestion, conversation, and the evening's final acts. The ladies have claimed the best chairs, arranging themselves in conversational clusters like archipelagos in an upholstered sea. Teacups and saucers create a gentle percussion as they're set down on marble-topped tables. The fire has been built up, crackling cheerfully behind its brass screen. You enter with the other gentlemen, and the room reconfigures itself. Couples reunite, husbands gravitating toward wives with the relief of partners restored after temporary separation. The unmarried sought themselves by interest and opportunity. The elderly claim seats near the fire. The young drift toward the piano, where entertainment will soon begin. The hostess claps her hands gently,
a sound barely louder than the fire's crackle, but commanding immediate attention. "I wonder if we might impose upon Miss Hartwell for a song." The soprano smiles graciously, having expected this request since accepting the invitation. She rises and moves to the piano with the unhurried confidence of a professional who knows her worth. The pianist, the eldest daughter of the house, who has been practicing for this moment all week, takes her seat at the keyboard with barely concealed nervousness. The room settles into attentive silence. Conversations taper to whispers, then cease entirely. Everyone turns toward the piano, arranging their faces into expressions of eager anticipation.
This is the evening's cultural pinnacle, the moment when entertainment transcends mere food and talk. The soprano's voice, when it emerges, fills the room like liquid gold. She sings in Italian, an aria from La Traviata, something about love and sacrifice. Her voice soars to the ceiling's cornices, drops to whispered intimacy, swells with emotion that requires no translation. The pianist follows with creditable skill, only stumbling once during a particularly complex passage. You watch the faces around you. The ladies lean forward slightly, caught in the music's spell. The gentlemen maintain appropriate appreciation while trying not to appear too moved. Showing excessive emotion about an Italian opera would be decidedly continental. The curate closes his eyes, perhaps praying or perhaps simply surrendering to beauty. The song concludes. Silence holds for a heartbeat. Then applause erupts, genuine, warm, sustained. The soprano acknowledges it with a slight bow, the pianist with a relieved smile. Success! The evening's entertainment has met expectations. "Brava!" the Admiral calls out, his voice cutting through the applause. "Magnificent! Like hearing Grisi herself in her prime!" The soprano accepts the compliment with practiced modesty. Though everyone knows she's far superior to Grisi ever was, this is simply how praise works, linking current excellence to legendary past. "Perhaps Miss Ashworth will favor us with something on the piano," someone suggests, and the eldest daughter, having survived her accompaniment duties, must now perform solo. She chooses Chopin, a nocturne that allows for romantic expression without requiring virtuosic technique. Her playing is competent rather than brilliant, but competence is sufficient. The family's musical education has been expensive and thorough. She navigates the piece without major error, investing it with enough feeling to seem engaged, but not so much as to seem vulgar. More applause follows, slightly less enthusiastic, but no less genuine. The daughter curtsies and retreats gratefully to a chair, her performance obligations fulfilled. "What about some parlor games?" the hostess suggests, reading the room's energy. Music is wonderful, but after 4 hours of dining, people need movement, laughter, gentle activity. "Charades!" someone calls out, and the younger members of the party brighten immediately. Charades, that venerable game of silent acting, offers opportunity for creativity, mild competition, and the kind of controlled silliness that Victorian drawing rooms permit. The room divides into teams with theatrical efficiency. You find yourself on a team with the Colonel's widow, 2 of the younger gentlemen, and 1 of the Lavender sisters. The opposing team includes the Orchid gentleman, the soprano, and several others whose theatrical abilities are unknown but about to be tested. The hostess produces a bowl of folded papers, each containing a phrase, proverb, or book title to be acted out. The rules are explained unnecessarily. Everyone knows how to play charades, but the ritual of explanation is part of the fun. The Admiral volunteers to go first. He draws his paper, reads it, and his face lights up with the joy of a man who has been given a gift.
He mimes something involving rowing, pointing at his uniform, making grand gestures that could indicate either drowning or commanding. His team shouts guesses, "Navy! The sea! Admiral!" Finally, someone hits it. "Master and Commander!" Triumph. The Admiral bows. His team cheers. The game is launched. Your turn comes eventually. You draw your paper and unfold it to read, "A stitch in time saves 9." A proverb. Easier than a book title, harder than a single word. You begin with the classic gesture for proverb, hands opening like a book. Then tackle stitch, miming sewing. Time, pointing at an imaginary watch. Saves, gathering something precious. And 9, holding up fingers. Your team is quick. The Colonel's widow gets it almost immediately, years of charades experience making her an expert reader of mime. Your team scores a point. You return to your chair feeling absurdly pleased with yourself. The game continues with increasing hilarity. The curate, drawing The Canterbury Tales, launches into a mime so elaborate and confused that both teams are laughing too hard to guess. The soprano, tasked with Pride and Prejudice, delivers a performance so arch and elegant that she makes simple gestures look like ballet. One of the younger gentlemen, attempting The Lady of Shalott, becomes so entangled in an imaginary loom that he nearly topples a flower arrangement. Between rounds, refreshments circulate. The butler and footman appear with trays of sweet biscuits, sugared almonds, and more tea for those who want it. Sherry materializes for gentlemen who need fortification. The room has relaxed into genuine enjoyment. The formal dinner's tension replaced by something approaching actual fellowship. "I propose, 'Are you there, Moriarty?'" suggests one of the younger men, and groans mix with laughter. The game, in which blindfolded players attempt to strike each other with rolled newspapers while calling out, "Are you there, Moriarty?" is considered slightly childish but undeniably entertaining. The hostess, calculating the risk of furniture damage against the benefit of continued high spirits, agrees. Space is cleared. 2 volunteers are blindfolded with silk scarves. They're each given a rolled newspaper and spun around 3 times. The rest of the company forms a circle, giggling and offering unhelpful directions. "Are you there, Moriarty?" calls the first player. "Yes," responds the second, immediately moving to a different position.
Swipe. The newspaper whistles through empty air. Laughter erupts. The game continues with players rotating in and out. Newspapers occasionally connect in with soft thuds, everyone laughing at the absurdity of well-dressed adults stumbling around a drawing room trying to hit each other with yesterday's news. You participate when drafted, finding yourself blindfolded and disoriented, the room's familiar geography suddenly mysterious. You swing your newspaper at what you think is Moriarty and connect instead with a chair leg. The room roars, you remove your blindfold and bow to acknowledge your defeat. As the evening progresses toward 11 o'clock, the energy begins its natural decline. The older guests settle into chairs and switch from games to conversation. The younger ones continue playing, but with decreasing vigor. The fire is banked lower, some candles are extinguished, the room dims into a softer, sleepier version of itself. The hostess, ever attentive, suggests one final entertainment. "Perhaps Mr. Ashworth will read to us." The host agrees, moving to his favorite chair near the best lamp. He selects a volume from the nearby bookcase, something comfortable and familiar. Tennyson, perhaps, or Wordsworth. Poetry that soothes rather than challenging. Verses that can be half heard while thoughts drift. His voice, trained by years of reading aloud, fills the room with measured cadence. "I come from haunts of coot and hern. I make a sudden sally, and sparkle out among the fern, to bicker down a valley." You listen, letting the words wash over you like warm water. The brook, a safe choice, gentle and meandering as its subject.
Around you, others settle into similar receptivity. The colonel's widow's eyes have closed, though she's clearly not sleeping, just resting them. The Lavender sisters lean against each other like bookends. The young people have quieted, the evening's excitement giving way to pleasant exhaustion. The poem continues, the Brook's journey paralleling everyone's journey through the evening, starting high and energetic, flowing through various adventures, arriving finally at something like peace. When the host concludes, no one applauds. The poem's gentle ending doesn't demand it. Instead, there is a collective sigh, a shared sense of completion. The Admiral checks his pocket watch and announces with genuine regret that he must be going. Early committee meeting tomorrow, naval business, can't be helped. His announcement breaks the spell that held the room suspended. Others stir, suddenly aware of the time, of their own morning obligations. The evening, which seemed like it might last forever, is clearly ending. "Thank you so much for a delightful evening," the Admiral's wife says to the hostess, rising and beginning the formal departure process. Others follow suit, expressing gratitude with varying degrees of originality but uniform sincerity. The host and hostess move to the door, ready to see guests off properly. The butler materializes to coordinate the retrieval of coats, hats, and carriages. You join the exodus, finding the colonel's widow and offering your arm to escort her down the stairs. She accepts with a smile that contains both gratitude for the gesture and amusement at the formality that persists even as everyone is exhausted and eager for their beds. In the entrance hall, the organized chaos of departure unfolds. Footmen distribute outer garments, ladies adjust their evening cloaks, gentlemen settle hats at proper angles, the orchid gentleman is searching for his gloves. The soprano has wrapped herself in a magnificent fur that makes her look like an empress. The younger people are making plans for an upcoming ball, their voices bright with the promise of future entertainments. Carriages arrive in sequence, announced by the butler with the precision of a railway conductor. The Admiral and his wife depart first. Rank has its privileges. Others follow in orderly succession. You wait your turn, making final pleasantries with the host and hostess. "Such a lovely evening," you tell them, and mean it. The dinner was magnificent, and the company even better. The hostess beams. This is her reward. Not just the compliments themselves, but the knowledge that her careful planning, her strategic guest list, her orchestration of every detail has produced success. Another dinner party to add to her ledger of triumphs. "You must come again," she says. "We're having a small musical next month. Nothing too formal, just a few friends." You know they accept the implied invitation, knowing that a few friends probably means 40 people, and nothing too formal still requires evening dress and perfect behavior. Your carriage is announced. You make your final bows, descend the steps, and climb into the familiar interior. The door closes, the carriage lurches into motion. Through the window, you see the lit windows of the house receding into the fog, the party continuing for a few more minutes as the last guests depart. The carriage rocks gently as it navigates the fog-shrouded streets. You lean back against the leather seat, letting exhaustion seep into your bones. Your collar feels tight, your shoes pinch, your stomach is uncomfortably full. Your mind is pleasantly tired from 4 hours of careful conversation. But you're satisfied. You navigated the evening without major error. Your fork selections were correct. Your conversation was appropriate. Your thank you note, which you'll write tomorrow, will be sincere. You have upheld your end of the social contract.
Behind you, in the house you've just left, a different story is unfolding. The front door closes on the final guest. The hostess leans against it for a moment, her perfect posture finally collapsing. The host loosens his collar with a sigh of relief. The performance is over. "Well," says the hostess, "that went rather well, I think." "Brilliantly," agrees the host. "The Admiral didn't monopolize too badly. The soup was perfect, no disasters." They walk through the drawing room, surveying the evidence of entertainment. Scattered cushions, abandoned teacups, sheet music left open on the piano. It looks like the aftermath of a gentle battle. Tomorrow, it will be restored to perfection. Tonight, it can simply be tired.
Downstairs, in the kitchen and servants' hall, an entirely different evening is underway. The servants have been working since dawn. They're not finished yet. The footmen bring down towers of dirty dishes, crystal, china, silver, all requiring washing by hand. The scullery maids, who've been waiting for hours, finally begin their marathon. In the vast kitchen sink, steaming water receives plate after plate. Everything must be washed, dried, and returned to its proper place before anyone can sleep. The cook, Mrs. Patterson, sits at the kitchen table with a cup of tea strong enough to strip paint. Her feet throb, her back aches. Her kingdom, normally spotless, looks like a culinary battlefield. Pots tower in corners, pans are stacked precariously. The remains of 12 courses litter every surface. But she's satisfied too. Every dish was perfect. Every course arrived on time. The soufflé rose. The aspic didn't collapse. The roast was pink. This is her art, her glory, her revenge on everyone who ever doubted that cooking is anything less than genius made edible. The butler, Mr. Harrison, makes his final rounds, locking silver away, banking fires, ensuring everything is secure. He's been on his feet for 16 hours. Tomorrow he'll rise at 6 and do it all again. But tonight's dinner was flawless. His staff performed perfectly. The wine service was impeccable. The timing was precise. He's earned his reputation one more time. The ladies' maids wait in bedrooms upstairs, ready to help their mistresses out of evening clothes and into night things. The laborious process of dressing reverses. Hooks and buttons and laces all undone, corsets loosened with relief, hair unpinned and brushed. The transformation from public performance to private person takes half an hour of practiced efficiency. "Was it a pleasant evening, ma'am?" a maid asks the colonel's widow. "Very pleasant. Good food, good conversation, and no disasters. One can ask for more." "And how was that gentleman you sat beside?" "Perfectly pleasant. Spoke well about gardens. Good family, I believe. We may invite him for tea." This is how reputations are built, one pleasant conversation at a time, one successful dinner party leading to the next invitation, the social web growing stronger with each thread. In nurseries throughout London, children sleep through their parents' return, unaware of the elaborate adult rituals that govern their world. They'll learn eventually. They'll sit through their first formal dinner with hearts pounding, watching older siblings for cues about which fork, which glass, which topic. They'll make mistakes and survive them. They will become, in time, the people hosting dinners and worrying about precedence and aspect stability. The city settles into its late-night rhythms. The streets empty. The fog thickens. Gas lamps hiss in their loneliness. A few carriages still clatter homeward, carrying the evening's last revelers. In houses throughout Belgravia and beyond, servants scrub, ladies undress, gentlemen finally remove their strangling collars. You arrive home, climbing your own stairs with heavy feet. Your valet appears to help with your coat, your shoes, the complicated architecture of evening dress. You're grateful for the silence. 4 hours of conversation is enough for anyone. As you prepare for bed, you think about the evening's curious paradox. So much effort for so little. Just food and talk, really. Just people sitting around a table, navigating forks and making small talk about weather and opera and travel. But it matters. The careful hierarchies, the correct precedence, the endless protocols that govern who sits where, who speaks when, which spoon follows which. These rituals hold society together like invisible scaffolding. They create order from chaos. They transform eating, that most animal of necessities, into something approaching art.
The Victorian dinner party is a machine for manufacturing civilization. Every perfectly timed course, every correctly placed fork, every appropriately modulated conversation contributes to the grand illusion that people are not merely animals who eat, but angels who dine. The servants understand this better than anyone. They see both sides, the glittering performance upstairs and the sweaty reality below. They know that elegance is labor made invisible, that effortlessness costs enormous effort, that the swan gliding serenely on the water is paddling frantically underneath. Mrs. Patterson, finishing her tea in the kitchen, thinks about tomorrow's meals. Breakfast, luncheon, tea, dinner. An endless cycle of planning, preparing, cooking, serving. But tonight's triumph will carry her through tomorrow's labor. She fed 22 people beautifully. She proved her worth one more time. That's something. Mr. Harrison, climbing to his own quarters in the attic, thinks about his ledgers. Every bottle accounted for. Every piece of silver secured. Every candle stub noted for the monthly accounting. His world is one of precise detail, where a missing teaspoon can throw off the entire inventory. But this precision is its own satisfaction. Order from chaos, control from complexity.
Today's scullery maid is tomorrow's kitchen maid, next year's cook. This is their education, paid for in dishwater and aching feet. The hostess, finally in her nightgown, sits at her escritoire and makes notes in her social diary. Who attended, what was served, what was discussed, who seemed to enjoy themselves, who might be offended if not invited next time. Her ledger of social obligations is as complex as any business accounting. Every invitation must be returned. Every courtesy must be reciprocated. The dance never ends. But she's content. Tonight's dinner will be remembered, not because anything spectacular happened, but because nothing went wrong. Perfect mediocrity is the highest achievement in her world. Excellence draws envy. Perfection draws suspicion. But a dinner party that everyone agrees was very pleasant, that's gold. The daughter in her own room replays her piano performance, cringing at the stumbled passage, relishing the applause. She's learning her mother's skills, how to manage a household, entertain guests, navigate society's treacherous waters. Someday she'll be the hostess, orchestrating her own dinners, managing her own crises. Tonight was practice. The younger guests, still energized by the evening, gather in their own homes for a final debrief. They dissect the dinner like surgeons examining a patient. Who said what? Who looked at whom? Which food was best? Which conversation most boring? The admiral is mocked, but gently. He's powerful. The curate is pitied, but kindly. He means well. The soprano is admired, but with envy. She's talented and knows it. Plans are made for future encounters. The next ball, the upcoming theater season. Who should be invited to what? Who might be paired with whom? The social chess game continues even as players sleep. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying your own performance. Did you talk too much about gardens? Should you have been more assertive in the charades? Was that joke about the weather actually amusing or just awkward? These thoughts chase each other like mice until exhaustion finally overtakes anxiety. Your eyes close, your breathing deepens. Sleep comes like a curtain falling on the evening's final act. All across London, in houses grand and modest, the same scene repeats. People lying in darkness, digesting food and conversation, reviewing their performance, worrying about tomorrow. The city breathes, in and out, sleeping and waking, a vast organism sustained by ritual and routine. The Victorian dinner party has ended, but it continues in memory, in gossip, in thank-you notes yet to be written, in invitations yet to be extended. It becomes part of the social record, a line in countless ledgers, a story told and retold until the details blur and only the essence remains. We gathered, we ate, we talked, we survived another evening of civilization. And tomorrow, Somewhere in London, another hostess will begin planning her own dinner party. The cook will start her preparations, the butler will check his wine inventory, the cycle will begin again, as it always does, as it always must. Because this is how the world works, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the accumulation of small rituals, repeated endlessly, creating the fabric of society one dinner party at a time. The fog presses against your window. The city murmurs its nighttime sounds. You sink deeper into sleep, your mind drifting through the evening's memories like a guest wandering through a dimly lit house, opening doors, finding rooms filled with conversation, laughter, and the gentle clinking of crystal against crystal. Somewhere, a clock strikes midnight. The new day has begun, but the old evening lingers in dreams and digestion. In your sleep, you navigate an endless dinner table, reaching for forks that multiply like hydra heads, engaging in conversations that loop and repeat, making your way through courses that appear and disappear like magic tricks. The Victorian dinner party haunts you, even in sleep. Its protocols, its hierarchies, its elaborate dance of civility and convention. But there's something comforting in those rituals too. Rules may be restrictive, but they're also protective. Structure may be limiting, but it's also freeing in its way. When you know exactly which fork to use, you don't have to worry about it. When you know exactly what to say, the words come easily. Perhaps that's the real secret of the Victorian dinner party. Not the food or the conversation, but the reassurance that comes from knowing your place, playing your part, following the script. In a world of uncertainty and change, the dinner party offers certainty. The same plates, the same protocols, the same progression from soup to savory, repeated so often it becomes almost sacred. You dream of soup, endless varieties, each requiring its own spoon. You dream of courses appearing and vanishing, servants gliding like ghosts, conversations that make perfect sense in the moment, but dissolve into nonsense when you try to remember them. You dream of a table that stretches into infinity, candles burning forever, a meal that never ends and never quite satisfies. And then finally, you dream of nothing at all. Deep, peaceful, exhausted sleep. The sleep of someone who has performed their duty, upheld their obligations, and earned their rest. The night deepens, the city sleeps, the fog turns the world soft and uncertain. And in houses throughout London, servants still scrub, hostesses still worry, and tomorrow's dinners are already being planned. But for now, for this moment, you are simply and completely asleep. Your formal clothes hung carefully for tomorrow's brushing, your stomach full of someone else's cooking, your mind quiet after hours of performance. The Victorian dinner party is over. The last guest has gone home. The last dish has been washed. The last candle has been extinguished.
Rest now. Dream of simpler suppers, of meals eaten in comfort, without protocol or precedence, of food that doesn't require 3 days of preparation and 4 hours of careful navigation. Dream of a time when dinner was just dinner, not a performance, not an examination, not a social minefield. Or perhaps, if you're honest, dream of the next invitation, the next opportunity to dress in your finest, to wield those many forks with confidence, to navigate those treacherous conversational waters with grace. Because despite everything, despite the exhaustion, the anxiety, the sheer overwhelming elaborateness of it all, there was something magnificent about this evening, something grand and ridiculous and utterly uniquely human about gathering around a table, lighting hundreds of candles, deploying armies of forks, and pretending that civilization itself depends on which spoon you choose for your soup. Maybe it does in its way. Maybe that's the point. Rest well. Tomorrow brings new dinners, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that you understand which fork goes where, and that you too are civilized. The fog embraces the city, the night protects the sleeping, and somewhere, in a kitchen that finally fell silent, a single candle still burns, forgotten, casting shadows on copper pots and scrubbed tables, keeping vigil over the ruins of civilization's nightly feast. Your breathing slows, deepens, becomes a rhythm as regular as the clock's ticking, as dependable as the tide. You are, finally, completely at rest. The Victorian dinner party has released you. Sleep.